Today we are going to learn about the Victorian era in Britain. This lecture corresponds to section 5.5 in your textbook. The Victorian era corresponds to the coronation and ascension of Queen Victoria of England to the throne in 1836 and her death in 1901. She reigned for 63 years, one of Britain's longest reigning monarchs in history. Pictured are paintings of her coronation in 1836 and a photograph of an older Victoria in the 1890s. The Victorian era society emphasized the values of honor, duty, morality, and sexual propriety or modesty. This was a time of very strict and traditional gender roles, when women were to be the caretakers of the home and children. Women were tasked with being the spiritual guides for families and raising proper children. Two spheres existed. The private sphere was the home and the sphere of the woman, whereas men were in charge of the public sphere. Victorian society emphasized the idea that women should be icons of femininity. By the end of the century, the, quote, new woman had made a debut. She was a woman who rejected the strict gender roles of women and dared to wear pants, ride bikes, and converse and debate with men in public. She might also smoke. Most denounced these new women as masculine and amoral. Here are photographs of the new women of the late 1800s. There is a cartoon in the middle from the British Life magazine that shows a woman asking an angel, "Is this heaven?" And the angel replies, "Yes, but this is the ladies' entrance." This cartoon is from the 1896 issue. People saw Queen Victoria as the British icon of domestic femininity and motherhood. Victoria and Prince Albert had 9 children who ended up marrying into all the most powerful ruling houses of Europe. Most ruling families today can trace their lineage to Queen Victoria. As an icon for the cult of domesticity, Queen Victoria was against women's suffrage, calling it mad, wicked folly. Emmeline Pankhurst was a leading figure in the women's suffrage movement. She broke away from the original movement, which she saw as less effective, saying that their peaceful tactics had not yielded any change. She would lead protests, some of which became violent, where women smashed windows. Many women, including Pankhurst, were jailed, beaten, and abused while in government custody. In 1918, British women over the age of 30 finally won the right to vote, but it would take another decade for younger women to win this right as well. The Victorian era saw the rise of 2 nations in Britain, the world of the rich and the world of the poor. Even with the wealth gained in the Industrial Revolution, millions of people in Britain still lived in destitute poverty. The poor working class lived in terrible slum housing and worked in the worst conditions in urban factories. The plight of the poor and working class led to the rise of the Chartist movement. The Chartists were radical reformers who wanted political reform for the working class. Chartists demanded universal male suffrage without a property requirement to vote, meaning even poor men would be able to vote. They wanted members of Parliament to be elected yearly and called for a secret ballot or the ability to cast a vote in secret. During their time, Chartists didn't win many reforms, but over time, most of their original demands came to be met. The Victorian era saw a peak in British influence and power. Britain was the wealthiest nation in the world, being the first to industrialize. It also had the best military in the world, with a heavy emphasis on their naval supremacy. The British Empire spanned the world and included India, Canada, Australia, and most of East Africa, and also the Caribbean.